I would like to now bring up to the platform our first two speakers, Jeanette Stewart and Mario Maniewicz. I think it's safe to say that back in October last year, when what was for all intents and purposes a hugely successful World Radio Communications Conference was brought to a close, nobody could quite have foreseen the global crisis that we find ourselves in now, just a few months later. So we're really looking forward to hearing from Mario on how ITU is adapting to the current situations and the plans and schedules for the early preparation of WRC 23 and how those are evolving. So Jeanette, I would like to now pass over to you to open our first session and of course to introduce Mario. So Jeanette, over to you. Thank you.
Dan, thank you very much. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody. So my name is Jeanette Stewart. I'm a principal in Analysis Mason. I work in the Analysis Mason's consulting team. For those of you who are not aware of us, we are telecoms, media and technology consultancy and research people. I'm joining you from my lockdown location in the UK. My background is in wireless network and spectrum issues. So I'm delighted to be joined today by Mr. Mario Maniewicz, who is joining us from the Radio Communications Bureau of the ITU in Geneva. He's director of the Bureau. This first session is about the Bureau's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and we're going to be having a discussion followed by questions from anybody who wishes to ask a question from this event. So Mario, welcome. Looking forward to speaking to you. Just by way of introduction, the COVID-19 outbreak is obviously affecting lives, it's devastating national economies, and it's also transforming workplaces around the world. How has it affected work in the ITU and specifically the work of the Radio Communications Bureau?
Yes, thank you, Janet, and hello to you and to everybody. I'd like just to thank Dan and Forum Europe for inviting me to this interview. I think it's most relevant to have a discussion on these issues that is important for our community to be informed on how, as you know, as everybody knows, today we are living, learning and working under exceptional circumstances as a result of this global health emergency produced by the COVID-19. So before addressing the specific measures taken by the ITU that you have asked me about, I would like first to recognize that many of us are very fortunate that we have the possibility of protecting our health and that of our families by staying home and teleworking. Many lives have been lost. Even more are fighting to regain their health and well-being, and millions more are dealing with the personal financial impact of the economic downturn resulting from the measures taken to combat the spread of the virus. So these are difficult times, and we appreciate that it will take time to both eliminate the spread of the virus and for the economies to recover globally. So I just wanted to start by saying that my thoughts and prayers goes to those who are really suffering as a result of this crisis. In our immediate context, Janet, in order to protect the health of delegates and ITU staff equally, and to help curb the spread of the COVID-19, ITU has rolled out mandatory teleworking, and this has been in place since March 16th. So we don't yet know how long this phase of the response will last or how it will be phased out. But at this time, it was decided that all ITU meetings and events would be held online, or in other words, virtually. So indeed, the short response to your question is that all physical meetings at ITU headquarters in Geneva remain suspended until further notice. But we are, however, making full use of the available technology to ensure that ITU's core functions and services to members are maintained.
Thank you. So just turning to your role specifically within the Radio Communications Bureau, how have these measures affected the work of the Bureau?
Mm-hmm. Well, the Radio Communication Bureau remains open, virtually of course, for key meetings and for consultation with our members. So please note that while convening the meetings of the ITUR study groups and the working parties, is an important part of the work of the BR. We do a lot more than that. And just to name one of the most important activities that you well know, we held a very successful WRC 19 last year. So the BR is now working very hard to take the results of the conference and publish the 2020 version of the radio regulations. And despite this COVID crisis, this work is ongoing and it will be accomplished later this year on schedule. So just to give you a hint of our main activities so far, on March 25th, the Radio Communication Bureau held its first ever virtual radio regulations board meeting with simultaneous interpretation in English, French, and Russian. All 12 members of the board, connecting from 12 different countries, joined the meeting virtually, along with the BR director and the BR subject matter experts. This shortened version of the board meeting was held because the board had important issues it had to address that could not be postponed to its July meeting. In particular, as all the listeners know, the WRC has adopted a decision that opened new orbital slots for broadcasting satellites, providing developing countries with the opportunity to regain access to spectrum orbit resources, thanks to a priority mechanism especially set for them. So administration seeking to take advantage of this opportunity had submitted requests to the board that required it to take actions that could not be deferred to July without having them suffer prejudice. So this was a very important decision-making meeting, and it was held effectively and efficiently with full remote participation by the board members. This is the first ever virtual RRB meeting, so this is really a landmark in history. So it's sad to have done it because of the reasons it has been done, but it's, however, a big success to have been able to do it. So on 31st of March, the BR published the final acts of the WRC 19, which is the basis for the update of the radio regulations, and they were published on schedule in the time frame that had been announced prior to the coronavirus outbreak. Another very important function of the BR is the processing of terrestrial and satellite network filings. This work has continued apace, even though the staff processing these filings are all working from home. So, however, there is a change, and it is that this COVID-19 has affected how we distribute the results of this work. Indeed, due to the limitations to postal delivery imposed by the Swiss authorities, the delivery of the physical DVDs that contain the BR International Frequency Information Circular, or BRIFIC as we call it for short, has been suspended from the edition of 31st March and until further notice. However, administrations and other subscribers can use the ISO copies of this BRIFIC available on our website. So, in short, we are keeping our activities apace, and despite working from home and having to use electronic tools, everything seems to continue to be rolling normally.
Well, that's great to hear that within the BR you're managing to keep activities on track and work remotely. Shall we move on then to discuss the study groups and the working parties? And I'm sure many of our participants today will be interested in this. Clearly, these groups and parties normally hold in-person meetings. So I see that the Bureau is announcing that these meetings are going to be held as remote participation or virtual meetings. Can you tell us a bit more about this move to virtual meetings? Do you expect these will be as effective as the in-person meetings? And how long do you think that might continue?
Yes, well, to tell you the truth, when this crisis started, the first thing we did was to start to postpone the meetings of the ITOR study groups and working parties, and postpone it by 1, 2 months, 3 months, even 4 months, thinking that this will be over by then, and then we'll resume a normal work. But not only we don't know until when this is going to last, but we also don't know when everybody is going to be able to be released from these restrictions or even confinements that the governments have imposed, because this crisis started in different places at different times. So we had to take a decision and we had to move our meetings online. So it's important to highlight, to mention, or to remind our listeners that the ITUR has been providing for remote participation already in its otherwise in-person meetings that you mentioned for a few years now. So it's not new. What is new is that these meetings are becoming fully virtual, but people were participating remotely in our meetings using electronic tools for many years now. For those that couldn't attend physically, the meetings being held in Geneva or in other places. So what the people might not be so aware is that the ITU has been a pioneer of multilingual interactive remote participation, which allows member states to participate in ITU meetings remotely with interpretation in the 6 official languages. So this is much more challenging than a one language platform. And this dedicated platform that we have allows remote participants to participate interactively using any of the 6 official languages of the UN. The screen shows captioning also in English, and the main conference screen, which is normally the document under discussion, as well as the image of the speaker, which provides to the participants a virtual experience of being in a single meeting room. So delegates can even raise their virtual hand to request the floor, and there is also a chat function which allows delegates to make their comments or questions directly to the chairman or to coordinate among themselves using the private chat option. So this is for the meetings that are held in 6 official languages. For the meetings of ITUR working parties, which is where the bulk of the technical work is done, they are held only in English. So for those meetings, we have much more flexibility in the platforms that we use, and in such cases, we can use commercial tools that are known like Skype for Business or GoToMeeting or any other of such. So we are continually learning and optimizing the way in which we hold our virtual meetings. After all, even when we get back to hosting in-person meetings either in the ITU headquarters or other venues, we will continue to provide for remote participation in those meetings. So this is a capability that we will continue to enhance as time goes on, certainly.
Great, so thank you for that. I think our participants today will potentially be interested in understanding whether the COVID-19 outbreak will result in a delay to the 2023 World Radio Communications Conference. What can you tell us about the preparatory process for the WRC23 and if we should expect a future delay in the conference?
Mm-hmm. Well, it is very fortunate that we are only at the beginning of this study period, and then the ITUR study groups and their working parties are now organizing their work programs and initiating their studies only. So these early meetings don't entail the finalization or approval of recommendations or reports or any hard decision at this point. So even if the move to virtual meetings slows the progress in this initial phase, we strongly believe that these meetings will soon be as productive as meetings that have been held in person previously, and that as hard decisions or approval of recommendations or reports are not necessary, they will not be hindered by this virtual way of working. So as you are aware or might be aware, the ITU holds 4 major conferences, and each of which occurs on a 4-year cycle. So they are the WRCs, of course, but also the World Radio Telecommunication Standardization Assembly from the standards sector, the World Telecommunication Development Conference, and the ITU Plenipotentiary Conference. So the ITU membership regularized this conference on a 4-year cycle because it was more efficient and cost-effective to support them with a centralized conference support organization, as well as for the member states to attend only one such major conference per year. So one of the reasons why we decided to move to fully remote participation or virtual meetings is that it will enable us to hold the WRC23 in the 4th quarter of 2023 on schedule. I wish to make very clear to all that we are fully committed to keeping the work toward the WRC23 on track and holding the conference on schedule. We expect the 2020 session of the ITU Council which is scheduled to be held in June, to adopt a new resolution that will set the place, date, and agenda of the WRC 23. They will make this decision with the full confidence that the dates set for this conference can and will be met.
Good. Well, Mario, thank you very much for taking the time from your busy schedule to chat with us about the work of the ITU BR and the sector in response to the COVID-19 outbreak. Do you have any final messages for our seminar participants before we ask for any questions?
Sure. Well, first of all, I thank you again for this opportunity and for taking time away from your program to talk about the work of the BR and the ITUR in response of this COVID pandemic. So as you know, working in radio communications has always required global coordination and global cooperation because radio waves don't respect any borders. So these are very difficult times that challenge us to bring our best selves forward, to continue all the measures that will bring this outbreak to an end, and at the same time to remain positive and continue working toward a better future for all of us. My main message today would be to reassure you that the BR is working diligently today from our respective homes and eventually from our offices to support the member states and all of our members in our global preparation for the WRC 23. Toward that end, we encourage all the regional groups to begin their activities in earnest via virtual meetings and other electronic means. We look forward to welcoming delegates back into the ITU at some point in the future. In the meantime, I would just tell you to stay safe and well, and sooner or later, life will come back to normal and we'll resume our usual way of working and communicating.
Mario, thank you very much for those kind words. It's been a delight speaking to you. We still have around about 10 minutes, I think, before the end of this session, so I can see that there are some questions coming in. So the first question is from David Happy, an independent consultant, and he says, Mario, I am impressed that the ITU's work has been progressing despite the COVID-19 pandemic. I wonder to what extent you think auctions and awards for spectrum will be delayed globally.
Mm-hmm. Well, a good question from Dave. I think that although this COVID-19 pandemic might let us believe that they will be delayed, because everything is being delayed because of the situations and the measures, restrictive measures that governments are taking on the move of people and the work in the different areas. I don't think this is one of them that is going to be much delayed. Why? Because one of the measures that governments have to take in order to fight against this, the downturn, the financial downturn or the economic downturn of this situation, is to provide more means for people to connect, to work using electronic tools, and to have the economy run more digitally. So obviously, auctioning spectrum is part of the tools that the governments and regulators have in order to achieve that. And I think that they will continue doing that as one of the measures in order to ensure that they are advancing towards a digital economy as fast as possible, which will help fight, as I said, the downturn of the economy produced by the COVID-19.
Great, thank you very much. So another question then from me, if I may, while we're waiting for any further questions from participants. You mentioned that clearly, we're fortunate that we're in the early stages of the cycle of studies for WRC 23. So you're in the sort of preparation stages before the study groups and the working parties start studying the items in detail. The agenda for WRC 23 is already drafted and agreed at WRC 19. You mentioned obviously this full virtual working is unprecedented within the ITUR. Hopefully, productivity is not impacted. But is there a risk if there is an impact on productivity that there has to be a subsequent relook at the agenda, or consideration of only taking forward certain items from the agreed agenda or anything like that?
Well, thanks, Janet. This is also a very relevant question. As I said before, and you repeated yourself, we are at the beginning of the study period. So we fully expect at this stage that the technical work in preparation for the conference will proceed and be completed to the greatest extent possible. This is always the case. We always have this expectation. So, but what is important is that there is no expectation that this current pandemic will have any effect on the scheduling of the conference. So, as usual, the conference will work on the basis of the technical studies and subsequent proposals made to the conference. And the ITUR study groups will have all the tools that they need to work effectively using virtual meetings. So we all look forward to that time when we can again meet delegates back in Geneva, as I said, or wherever the meetings are going to be held. But in the meantime, we encourage everyone with an interest in the items on the agenda of WRC to get to work on those technical studies and participate in the ITUR activities rather than speculate with a postponement of the conference. Having said that, and in order to address on your specific concern about the agenda of the conference, let me remind you that all the WRCs make decisions based on the results of the studies that have been conducted during the study period. So it's not unusual for some studies to not have been completed to the satisfaction of all delegations. So in those instances, the conference may decide to address some elements of an agenda item and defer others to a future conference. So this is normal procedure. But having said it, up until the first day of the WRC, all work is done based on the draft agenda of the WRC, which is then formally adopted on the first day of the conference.
That's clear. Thank you very much, Mario. There's a question from Bashir Patel from Inmarsat, and the question is, although ITUR has planned to have virtual meetings, are these likely to be for a higher level at plenary and not at sub-working groups? Are you able to comment on that?
Yeah, sure. So he's referring to the ITUR study group meetings and related and other groups, working parties and other groups. So yes, it is foreseen to have it at all levels. We've already had the first plenary meeting of study group 7, which was held virtually. So as I said before, these first meetings of the cycle are not very hard, tough decision-making meetings regarding recommendations or reports. They are mainly to organize the work of the study group and the working parties towards the rest of the cycle. So it's more organizational type of meetings and issuing the liaison statements for the other groups to work, feeding these groups that need, because many agenda items are fed by several groups, various groups, not only one study group. So these are the main purposes of this first meeting. So there is no big issue, let's say, but it's not restricted to working parties. As I mentioned, we had already one meeting of the plenary of the study group, of study group 7, which was virtual, and it was successful, and everybody was very happy about it. Of course, we are adapting the time because we are people that are very far in the West, California, Mexico, and then we are very people that very far on the other end, Australia, Japan, etc. So we are having shorter meetings in the middle of the day here in Geneva, so that everybody can sleep at least a bit. But those are more focused meetings with reduced agendas and much more efficient, leaving all the presentation to the people to read first, and then just devote the time just to the main discussion and the added value, let's say.
Sounds a very sensible way of working. Thank you. We've got a couple more questions here. So first of all, Toby Ewell from Policy Tracker. Toby says, hi, everybody. So hi, Toby. His question is for you, Mario, whether you see COVID-19 having any impact on the extent of demand for spectrum for different services. And what he's thinking about here is the mix between mobile spectrum and other services. Do you have any other comments on that?
Yes, well, it's a bit complementary to the first questions we got. I think that yes, I don't know if there is demand for additional spectrum, but at least there should be some pressure on the governments and the regulators to release the spectrum that is already allocated for the various services. This will enable people to be connected more easily and to have more services towards the digital economy. Obviously, when we are working from home and these kind of things, that is very much advertised by the newspapers and things like that, it's not that we are using mobile technology for that. But that doesn't mean that having the possibility of having, let's say, more services that are mobile-based for telemedicine, for industries, for any other of the components of the digital economy would help in such a time, because if we can minimize the movement of people, we would be helping curb the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you. So, in fact, another related question from this time from Mario Fromov, who's Commissioner at IFITEL. So, given the huge emphasis on working from home, is there a need for additional emergency focus on unlicensed spectrum, given the higher priority for Wi-Fi and other similar technologies?
Well, this question is also linked to the previous one. I think that what we are surcharging when we work from home, and we see this from the reports from the operators, national operators, is the network that the operators are. It's not the Wi-Fi at home that is surcharged. What is surcharged is their own network, because they cannot cope with the traffic that they have. We have a mix of things. We have people that are working from home, but we have also younger people, let's say, because I think people of all ages do what I'm going to say. They're staying at home and then entertaining themselves. So all the streaming and all the video sharing, which is really the heavy elements that the network has to carry, are there more present than ever, because people are not out. They are staying at home and doing that, and so these are surcharging the network. But so what the operators have been facing is how to manage all this traffic in a way that will not make the network collapse. So by having more Wi-Fi, I mean, we will have, let's say, easier access for the last kilometer or last mile, depending where you are. But the main problem here is really the core of the network in the operators, let's say, system, that is being really overloaded with so many people using telecoms at the same time.
Well, I'm sure we'll return to be discussing some of these themes in the remainder of this this conference over the next couple of days. We just have a couple of minutes left. So, Mario, one final question from Daniel Obam from the Kenya government. How will the BR work with ITU regional organizations in the WRC 23 preparations?
Well, thank you, Daniel, for these questions. And you know, Daniel Obam is the chairman of our Radio Communication Advisory Group at the ITU, so he's quite an important personality. And he will chair the first RAG fully virtual ever, the RAG meeting that will be held in May. So we look forward to working with the regional organizations in the WRC 23 preparations. We think that they will have to start as we have, by virtual meetings. And we will certainly take part in them as we normally do, virtually this time. Nobody can travel. The world is stopped. I mean, all the international travel is stopped. So the only way to start is virtually. But for these regional organizations, the same apply as I said for the ITU. That means for the ITUR. That means we are at the beginning of the cycle. So also the regional organizations, when they meet at this time of the cycle, they do to organize their work and assign responsibilities to various groups and to select the chairs of those groups and organize how the studies are going to be conducted. So this can be done virtually easily. and then leave the difficult decision making for a later stage where we hope we will be able to be back together physically for such decisions at the regional level and also at the ATU level.
So Mario, I think we're out of time. So just want to say again, thank you very much for joining everybody today. It's been a delight talking to you. I think now I have to hand back to Dan Kraft from Forum Europe to wrap up. So Dan, back to you.
Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you so much. And yeah, thank you very much for that hugely interesting session. And Mario, especially to yourself as well. I think it was really, really useful to hear directly from yourself on the schedule for ITU. And I'm sure everyone who is watching around the world will agree that was a fantastic way to kick off this week's event. So thank you both very much again.